Welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. I'm your host, Emma Thomas, founder of Managing the Menopause and the Triple Shift. My guest today is Lou Furby, and Lou is the UK D&I lead at Specsavers and has been involved in their menopause support for the last, at least 4 years. So we're going to get into some of how all of that came about and hopefully have some good practical takeaways for anyone listening who really wants to either start opening up the conversation around menopause in their workplace or kind of really start pushing that forward. So hopefully something for everybody. Welcome along to the podcast, Lou.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. This is the best week of the year as well, isn't it? It's World Menopause Day week.
All happening.
So, yeah, brilliant.
Yes, so we should make that clear. If anyone's listening to this, we're recording it the day before World Menopause Day. So lots and lots happening, I'm sure. So thank you especially for finding the time to do this when I'm sure you've got lots of other things that you're juggling at work.
No, absolutely, my pleasure. It's really, really good to be here, and it's really. We were just saying where it's actually really nice to kind of circle back on the journey every now and again that we've taken. I think sometimes it's very easy to fall into the trap of feeling that you've not done enough, but sometimes just doing these sessions and kind of circling back on the stuff that you have achieved, it's a really good reminder of how far you have come and what you have, delivered and achieved during what really arguably is quite a short period of time, really, since we started MenoTalk, our menopause network group. So yeah, brilliant.
So take us back. So how did it initially come about? Because the whole menopause conversation, menopause landscape has changed so much, hasn't it, in the last 5 years? Yeah. So you launched MenoTalk in 2021, but there must have been quite a lot of work before that.
Yeah, we as a business went through a year before that, like the world did, went through obviously a very difficult period. But as a business, we recognised that actually we were almost an additional emergency service during COVID, because we were able as a business to keep our doors open, to take some of the pressure off the NHS for site test appointments and checks and that sort of thing. And I think what we acknowledged was that access to care really is fundamental to our business, and we've always lived and breathed that that ethos at Specsavers, giving affordable eye care to everybody every day kind of thing. And part of that then is the support that we also give to our staff, not just to our customers. And so I had a bit of as most women that go through this, starting these network groups and things do, I had a difficult start to my menopause journey. I started menopause quite early, sort of late 30s when I first noticed symptoms. Several doctor's appointments later, nobody piecing together the correlation between the headaches, the bleeding, the mood swings, and all of those different things. All of a sudden I decided one day, this was becoming too much. I'd literally spent the entire day crying. I didn't know what was wrong with me.
Oh, no.
I just felt so incredibly down and confused. And again, a phrase that you hear so often, I wasn't myself at all. I just didn't feel like Lou anymore. And I just sat in front of a computer and just thought, I'm just going to Google what's going on here, because clearly my GP isn't giving me the answers that I need. And it was a light bulb moment, and I think the tears came probably from the relief,
the frustration, and
yeah. And it almost feels odd to say today, because actually there are so many women out there now that know what's coming because of the work that we've done the last 4, 5, 6 years to educate, and the coverage that we're now getting in the media for menopause means that women do recognise these, what's coming. I didn't. I had no idea, and I just knew that I felt so out of sorts, and I was starting to worry about my performance at work because I knew it was being affected. I'm a very organised, structured person. I lost all of those skills and capabilities. And the more I mourned and questioned why I was losing those capabilities, the worse they got. So I spent an entire day researching, light bulb moment, had a bit of a conversation with my line manager, who at the time was a fantastic line manager, very supportive, very understanding, but also equally uneducated on the topic of menopause and male. So adds another kind of factor into the mix. And I realised that in order to get the support that I needed from him, I also needed to educate him. And I was educating myself, educating my GP to some extent, it felt like.
We're all learning together.
Yeah, and then educating my line manager. And I just had a moment where I went, nobody should have to do this, why am I having to take all the accountability on my shoulders? I'm the person that's going through this. I've already got these, strains and stresses on and anxiety that I'm dealing with. And I've got this extra sort of facet of responsibility to have to educate my workplace. And I just thought, I don't want another woman to go through this. So how do we address it? And reached out to a colleague who was having equal sort of challenges, very different journey to me. Her challenges and her symptoms very different. But we just had a bit of a conversation and said, what do we do? What's the best thing here? Let's just start a network group up. Let's see, even if it's only us, like we've got support from each other. Let's see where we go with it. And unsurprisingly, we saw a huge number of people very quickly reach out and go, oh my God, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. Like, thank God you exist. Equally, we did also have a number of people that kind of messaged us and said, you're too late. I'm on my way out the door. I felt really isolated and I'm done. I'm going to go and start my own little craft business somewhere. And I've tried to educate my team and I'm not getting the support I need. And, I can't do this anymore. And we, we probably lost, to my knowledge, in the first few months, we probably lost 3 or 4 employees out of our business that we knew of as a result of their symptoms and challenges at work. So it felt really obvious that it was an area that we needed to do something about.
Yeah, and how goodness knows how many had left previously, but just no one had known. So what kind of support did you get from within the business? Because I think sometimes, so often, it comes from this sort of grassroots level, and a lot depends on the kind of support that you can get from within the business. And let's be honest, there's not always a lot of budget available to do stuff.
Yeah.
It's, people are doing stuff on top of their day jobs. But that sort of top-down sponsorship, I think, is really, really key. So did you have that from the beginning?
We did. We were really lucky. So, and I've been with Specsavers 21 years, so I'm under no, illusion that actually stakeholder relationships I've got within our business certainly have helped me during this period, because I know so many people. I've grown up with so many people that didn't start in senior leadership that are now there, that were people I've worked with along the way. Absolutely, those influencers hugely
called
helped
in
us.
some favours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm in no denial that, that wasn't the case. We chose very early. We drew a line in the sand from day one, which was, and there were two aspects to it. One was that we were absolutely inclusive to everybody. So MenoTalk was never going to be about women. It was always going to be about everyone, because as we repeated, over and over during those earlier days, 50% directly impacted, the other 50% of the world indirectly impacted. So we never made it exclusive to women. And in doing so, then we introduced a board sponsor who was male, who had his own sort of first-hand experience of his wife's journey on menopause, so had some knowledge. But we approached him and said, look, we don't want to do the obvious here. We don't want to bring in the female HR director. We want this to be somebody that actually is a recognisable face in the business. Equally, he'd been quite instrumental in taking the business through some difficult times during COVID. He was a trusted face. He was a known person,
it's a signal, isn't it, to other people within.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's absolutely that. And it was absolutely the right thing to do. And we've never looked back, to be honest. He sits obviously on our board and represents us, as do all of our network groups. And Specsavers have a board sponsor representative, in fact. So that was the start of it. We were lucky that it also coincided with our focus and a realization that actually culturally we had a really strong environment, diverse network, diverse kind of workforce. But equally, we were at a turning point as a business in terms of what we were doing for our D&I strategy and how we were going to kind of deliver that longer term. So it coincided quite nicely in some respects with that, which helped also get the message not just on a level of menopause, but on a broader kind of D&I agenda, I guess. So that really helped us. The second thing that we did was we also recognised anybody and everybody in our network group, certainly from the early days, were probably there because they were going through their own experience and journey of menopause. By default, then, that probably meant they were having some challenges at work. So unlike our other network groups where we have active members that get involved in campaigns, that run projects and all that sort of stuff, we kind of went, we're going to go the opposite on this. We're not going to ask them to contribute because we're going to listen to them. Primarily, that's the absolute purpose of our network. But we're not going to ask them to actively
They're already holding a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to this day, that was still absolutely the right thing to do. And it was the right foundation for the network group. Now that we have a lot of allies within the group, that's obviously changed because we do have people that aren't necessarily directly impacted. But in the early days, it was the right decision. And it was mainly because we needed to earn their trust. We needed them to know that we weren't doing this with any kind of agenda other than to provide support and help to them and to listen. But equally, we needed them to know that if they needed something, we would take that as co-chairs and we would try and find a way to deliver a change within our working practices that helped support them. And that was fundamentally what we went with from day one, I think. And it was the right thing to do, along with our kind of single objective, which was to break the stigma and to open up the conversation around menopause. And that's all we focused on, actually, for the first 12 to 18 months. We didn't try and do any campaigns or any activities. We just tried to get people comfortable with the topic of menopause. And it coincided with Davina's show, and that really helped. And, it was a perfect set of circumstances, really, but also circumstances that we capitalised on.
And how much of what you've sort of done subsequently was informed by what the people within that community group were telling you?
Always. Everything and anything that we do is fundamentally dictated. Dictated's a strong word, isn't it? But driven actually is a better way of putting it. It's driven by what our members tell us they need and want. So things like contributing to discussions around uniform changes for store staff, things like talking about the tools that were available digitally for our support office teams in particular, because actually we know that, and we all know this today, but we maybe didn't 4 or 5 years ago, deep sleep deprivation is hugely impactful on how you, perform your role. And just having really honest conversations with colleagues and line managers with the support of HR and ER, where we kind of say, actually, are there adjustments we can make to your working day through the tools that we've got available already that can help you? And that's things like recording meetings, transcripts, using things like Planner for reminders and that sort of stuff, because we hear so often, particularly from our support office teams, that memory fog is the really debilitating, factor of menopause. And
I think it came out top, didn't it, in the menopause mandate survey that's just out? Is it 86%, I think? So it was actually the most prevalent symptom that people were managing.
And for women who have always managed to juggle, I mean, we joke, don't we, that, we can multitask. We can.
Juggling all the things.
For women that can do that, losing the thing that enables them to do that, particularly when they're in a part of their life where they've got children at home or teenagers and younger children, they've got aging parents they're having to look after, as well as their own life and their own busy work schedule. To lose that one thing that enables them to do all of those, that makes them themselves, actually, I think is really hard to articulate to anybody that's not gone through it. But that's the thing that I think makes you question your identity as well.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because there's almost like there's this default assumption that we will be good at that. And so we try, and obviously we want to be seen as capable and being able to manage all the things. And it's almost like, I find it so hard to kind of explain, but it's suddenly like women feel like they're failing, but actually they're kind of set up to fail because we're expected to do so much in the first place.
Absolutely that. And I think, my defining moment to really go and kick off at my GP, if I'm absolutely honest, about getting treatment, was when I absolutely lost my mind with my 18-year-old stepson at the time about how he'd filled the dishwasher. And when I say lost my mind, like I felt like
Screaming banshee.
it was an out of body experience almost. I remember I almost watched myself behave that way, incredulous with how I'd gotten there over
Who is
something.
this person? Why is she shouting?
Entirely that, absolutely. And you hear it so often, don't you, from women going, I'm just not myself anymore, I'm not me, I don't know what it is, I can't, it's so hard to articulate. I think also because it happens quite gradually. I think you slowly, if you're really unlucky like I was, where your symptoms started quite early and you don't immediately attribute them to menopause, I didn't notice that the change in my behaviours because it happened over such a long period. But then actually, I think I've probably come out of menopause now. And I say I think because I've got a coil fitted, so I don't actually know when my last bleed was. But I almost have that, like that. I almost had that switch a few months ago where I woke up one day and went, "Oh, this feels different. Look who's back." And I can't tell you how lovely it is to feel myself again. But yeah, I probably had about 12 to 13 years where Lou Furby was just not the person that she was.
Wow. It is. It almost seems unbelievable, doesn't it, that it can go on for that amount of time. And I think that's another thing about, you talked about that sort of not feeling yourself and finding it hard to articulate. It's really hard for a partner, a line manager to understand what we might be going through when we can't even articulate it ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that whole kind of like, well, how long is this going to go on for? I'm like, if we knew, we would tell you. Absolutely. We don't know either.
Completely that. And also, and this is why allyship is so hugely important around menopause, but also, early days, like all we heard from our managers were, well, I don't know how to have the conversation. I'm really worried that I'm going to, say the wrong thing or not come across supportive and all this sort of stuff. And so we recognised very early that, oh my God, information and education was absolutely key if this was going to work. And so we partnered actually with an expert because, again, we recognise that we're not the experts. We've got our own personal journey and experience, but everybody's is different. So we partnered with Hempicked, with Deborah Garlick and the team, and we looked at other sort of experts within the field, and it just felt the right brand connection for us. It felt, the synergy felt right. So, and their guidance and support was absolutely invaluable, in helping us kind of navigate how we ensured that we almost put our money where our mouth was. Like, we were out there with this network group, like, what are we now going to do? And Hempicked were a brilliant guide to help us kind of get through that period. And initially also signing up to something as simple as the Wellbeing of Women Workplace Pledge for menopause. That was our first line in the sand. That was our first kind of footprint stamp to say, we're doing this, we're committed. So we're signing up to this pledge. And then from that to kind of look at getting accredited so that we could stand out there and say, we have put our money where our mouth is. It holds us to account as well, actually. It also makes sure that we don't take our foot off the gas, actually, which is also important, that we don't all go in a world where we go, oh, look, we're all menopause friendly accredited, or, we've got this accreditation that tells the world that you are what you are. But then after that, you don't do anything to kind of maintain that kind of awareness and the standard that you've set. I think it holds us to account to ensure that doesn't happen, which is fantastic. So I think I would always say to anybody that's looking at starting up their own network group, like, do it. Don't be afraid to do it, but don't put too much pressure on yourself, because ultimately it will be a passion project. You will probably find you take a lot of ownership, because something like menopause, I mean, I've heard some just horrific stories from people, not just women, in fact, men as well, talking about their wives and their spouses, some horrific stories that I've sat and cried, thinking, oh my God, these people just need someone to hear them and help them. And you have to prepare yourself for that. Absolutely. And it's some days it's hard, but there is so many rewards that go with it as well, which,
That's maybe a good segue into what if there's a sort of somebody listening and they're, I don't know, either they kind of have some sort of responsibility for well-being within the company, or they, they're thinking that they might like to start up a sort of similar community group. What are your kind of top tips for kind of getting something like that off the ground?
So first of all, I would say don't try and do it all on your own. Make sure that you've got somebody else to support you. Like Caroline was, such a great sounding board. We were very lucky. My background was comms and events, so that benefited us. Caroline's background was learning and development.
Mm-hmm.
Those two went
Perfect
hand in hand. In terms of, yeah. So I would say get the right stakeholders involved. Talk to people in your HR, ER teams. Talk to people in your wellbeing or D&I teams. Maybe set yourself up with a steering group. That's one of the earlier things that we did, was we set up a steering group with representatives from across teams like facilities, IT, all of those kind of key areas of the business that we knew could offer us kind of guidance and advice on how to help, people that were struggling. Have a co-chair so that you're sharing some of the load. Get yourself a decent sponsor. Consider getting yourself a mentor as well. That might not be your sponsor, it might be someone separate. But I think mentoring really helps. And I actually have a few mentors that I talk to external to my business that are, have been invaluable in helping me sort of develop, the network group, but also working in the realms, more broadly of D&I. And I'd say, and it's a phrase I don't like, but I use it, pick off the low-hanging fruit. Pick off the stuff that you can do and implement quickly and easily, because everything you're doing today is 100% more than what you were doing yesterday.
Yeah, something's better than nothing.
Exactly. And remember that. Always remember that, when you're giving yourself a bit of a hard time because you weren't able to launch that piece of training for World Menopause Day, it's a bit like the centerpieces at a wedding. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew that was your plan. So when they do launch, it doesn't make a difference that it's not quite aligned to the day you wanted it to happen. If you do get booted off your staff comms, which, by the way, happened to us the first World Menopause Day, we tried to cover off MenoTalk. The following year, though, we did a complete takeover. So remember, it's a war, not a battle. And I think sometimes you have to accept that, there are some things that fall along the wayside, that can be really disappointing, but just always keep the focus that what you're doing is so much more than what's happened before. And that's the bit that really, really matters, I think.
Yeah. And you talked a little bit about, managers coming to you and saying, oh, I don't know how to have these conversations. So I do feel like that's one of the really, really key pieces, is getting people comfortable having those conversations.
Absolutely.
So how have you kind of approached that? And have you found that there are sort of still now sort of pockets where people kind of feel a bit uncomfortable?
I think one of the challenges we have in Specsavers, and maybe it's not a challenge, it's just symptomatic of the way our business is set up. We're a joint venture partnership. That basically means that our store partners have ownership over their own business. And sometimes they make decisions that could be profit related. They make decisions that could be well-being related. It obviously varies. They are owners of their own business and they're more than capable of making those decisions. So one of the challenges we have is we can't mandate anything in Specsavers. We can't kind of come out, and we can make stuff essential, and we can, really drive completion of some training modules and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately we can't mandate a lot. So we have to think of more sort of cleverer ways almost to kind of get that engagement. And senior leadership for us is the way that happens, because they are faces in our business that are trusted, known, and if you can get them to kind of get involved in a campaign somehow, or, get their kind of endorsement testimonials or that sort of stuff, it does help with the credibility. I think we ran a campaign when we launched our staff training for colleagues and managers on menopause. We launched a campaign where we basically asked all of our senior leaders to put their face to a montage poster, really, advertising the training, but they each also represented a symptom of menopause. And we deliberately chose symptoms that were less familiar. It was around about the time where people were starting to cotton on to the fact that it wasn't just mood swings and hot flushes. There was a bit more to it than that. And we linked it back to our business. And we were quite lucky that we could do this, because tinnitus is a symptom of menopause. We're a hearing business. and dry eye is a symptom of menopause, and we're obviously an opticians. So it enabled us to kind of make partners make the connection.
It's quite relevant.
And also kind of gave them the tools to have conversations with customers as well, actually, that were coming in. And I remember one partner contacted me and going, I've just had a conversation with a customer about her dry eye. She's been coming into us for, a couple of years now, getting dry eye products. And I realised from the training that I've just done, she's in menopause. Like, the reason she's having these symptoms, and he said, completing the training gave me the language and the confidence to be able to explore that conversation with her and actually have a wider discussion around her sight changes during her menopause and stuff, which, you can't ask for anything better than that, really. So at a point where it was also important for staff, they started to see that actually there was a connection with customers as well. And I think that really helped us to kind of get partners, our store directors, to really understand that there is a wider benefit here, and it's not just to your staff, it's actually to your customers as well. But that poster that we used with the faces of all of our senior leaders, that we saw a huge spike in our training materials at that point, because it was almost like an admission of, we don't know what we don't know about menopause, so we're going to do this training. And by the way, when we're doing this, did you know that, gum disease and those sorts of problems, digestive problems, all of those symptoms that are lesser known actually are a menopause symptom as well. So it was just a really simple, effective campaign that really bolstered, the benefit of doing the training that we recently launched. So.
Another sort of challenges to sort of help people get reasonable adjustments in a retail environment versus a kind of an office-based job.
Yeah, there are definite challenges, and there are challenges for us as well in communicating with that community of people as well, because they don't sit in front of a computer, they don't, get an email and read it immediately like we do in our support offices, and they don't necessarily access our intranet system as thorough, as easily as you would if you sat in front of a computer all day. And we've got a group of really strong partners. Actually, we've got a partner up in Scotland, Arlene, who's really driven the conversation around menopause at a kind of a chair level, a regional sort of level. We've got a partner in a group of Manchester stores, Amanda, that does the same. The approach we take with our stores really is have the conversation in the first instance, and really explore the things that are affecting the individual. Because actually, if Doris is coming in and saying that, she's the meet and greeter and she's standing at the front door all day and the door's wide open, and actually she's not having hot flushes, she's having cold flushes, is there a way that we can, change the approach for Doris doing that role? And is it as simple as you keep the door shut and give her an extra coat? Things like, it really is, I think, about just exploring what can help. There's a manager we've got down in Alton store who she was, and I know she'd be happy for me to say this because we've run a number of stories around this. She was suicidal. Her symptoms were so severe. She went through a surgical menopause, and she said she walked to work one day and just carried on walking to the bridge, and it was a case of like, this is breaking point kind of thing. And her manager, the director of that store, was hugely supportive. She recognised that something wasn't going right, and that she was having issues, and so they had a kind of an adjustment plan, really, to kind of take her off the shop floor, to accept that some days she might walk in and go, I can't do people today. I just can't. My anxiety is at a level where I can't interact with people. But what they did was they really educated the store team around what she was going through. And they gave them, real insight into why she might walk in one morning and go, I can't. Because that adjustment affects the rest of the team. And I think we do have to be really mindful of that. And the way that you get buy-in from the team and support for that is, again, education, helping them to really understand what's going on. What's also interesting is, and I have said this, and it's a bit controversial probably, but I have said this to a few managers, but how uncomfortable would a manager be sitting and talking to a pregnant woman? actually that happens. We have pregnancies in our business all the time, and as a manager you just accept that you sit down and you talk through the plan, the different kind of experiences that woman's going to feel and experience over the coming months, the adjustments to a uniform, all of those different things. But actually it's a similar approach for menopause. Like, just because we've not got a baby at the end of it doesn't change the fact that she's going through something very similar. Her hormones are changing, she's feeling very different about herself but as a manager, you're quite comfortable to have a conversation around pregnancy. So it shouldn't feel any different around menopause or even menstrual health, actually, because there is a wider, need here, which is to understand menstrual health more broadly, because
we don't leave our bodies behind when we go into the office.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we started MenoTalk, we had another agreement, actually, that we weren't going to shy away from difficult language. We weren't going to try and call a period, something different to what it is. It is what it is. It's a bleed, right? We bleed every month, and I remember early days throwing in, different symptoms, conversations, and throwing in talk around vaginal dryness and seeing the absolute horror of
the recoil effect.
Yeah, like, oh my God, she's used that word, and it's like, that's what it is, like, and it's flipping horrible, like, let's not shy away from this. And I think you do have to commit to being very transparent around the topic. And I think if you're going to still dance around the detail of it and call period products sanitary items, or I remember having a conversation with somebody in HR trying to explain to me that we'd run out of period products in one of our bathrooms without actually saying period products. And I genuinely, for the first 30 seconds of the conversation, had no idea what she was talking about, because she didn't refer to them. And I just remember thinking, how are we ever going to get over this if we can't just call these things what they are, And so I think there is something around taking an expectation or having the comfort around the language that is associated with menopause as well, because if you dance around it, then you lose your credibility a little bit, I think.
If anybody's listening to this and thinking, I need to have that difficult conversation with my line manager, what would you say to them?
I would say, if you can access some training through your workplace to understand, if you're lucky enough to have training that explains how to have that good conversation, then absolutely, access that training. I would say, don't be afraid to have that conversation. If you feel you don't have the relationship with your line manager where you feel comfortable having that discussion, don't be afraid to reach out to your HR or your ER department and ask them for support to have the conversation. But I think, and maybe this is just a little bit about me, I think you kind of almost need to start as you go on. And I think if you do reach out for other teams and people to help you have that conversation, you've kind of set a precedent from the get-go, which is that you're not really comfortable with being that honest and transparent yourself. And I think that's what you just have to be a little bit careful of. It's difficult, isn't it? Because not everybody has a great relationship with their line manager, right? I was very, very lucky, and I'm very aware of that. But if I think about different line managers I've had in the past, I probably wouldn't have been happy having that conversation. But I would also say you can't not have it either. And sometimes we do just have to face into, difficult conversations and I'm not saying they're difficult because of the topic. I'm saying they're difficult because of the relationship. I think that's a separate kind of challenge probably. But I would absolutely say, have the discussion, even if it's only a case in your first conversation where you just throw in that you're starting to experience and notice changes, and agree how you can manage that, how you can manage that discussion going forward. Ask your line manager, I'm going through this, I obviously want to be able to manage it in my workplace as well as my personal life. So how do we together navigate this? And I think if you're just honest and just really almost vulnerable, I guess, around needing their support, I think you'll get the right kind of reaction from them. If you're a manager, I would say, don't be afraid to have that conversation and don't shy away from it. And please don't disregard it. The worst thing that you
possible thing.
Yeah. I don't know whether anybody's been watching the series, the Sally Wainwright series with Riot Women.
Right. I haven't watched it yet, but it's high on my list of things to do this weekend.
The first episode, there's a kind of scene where she talks to a line manager about how she's feeling, and he responds with what you would argue were textbook kind of responses, but just so inappropriate. So women in this period need to be validated. And the worst thing we can do when we have those conversations is not validate what they're going through. So I think as a manager, just bear that in mind, validate them. Like, don't make them feel invisible. Don't make them feel like what they're going through isn't important, because it absolutely is.
Yeah. And we can't necessarily fix it either straight away or at all, but just, as you say, being heard and supported is so important.
And reviewing those kind of agreements as well around, how we're managing it, stuff like that. Don't forget that we are still a business. I've said this to a number of women that have kind of gone, I just want to work from home for the rest of my life because my symptoms are so difficult. Yeah, I get that. But actually, what's your end of the bargain? We'll talk to you about what adjustments we can make in the interim, and we'll discuss them every, quarter or so with you, and about how but we do have to think about how it impacts the rest of the team. And if you're not trying to access treatment or support to kind of, resolve your part of the issue, then that's a wider issue kind of thing, a wider problem. Yeah. We do offer at Specsavers, actually, we do offer financial support for some people that are part of our wellbeing scheme as well, to access private care and appointments and treatment consultations around menopause, which I think is something else that businesses should consider. And we have Headspace app as well to help people with their wellbeing and stuff. I think it has to be a holistic solution, I think, so yeah, I would say think more broadly as well, just beyond the support that you give your network members.
Yeah. Well, Lou, thank you so much for sharing all of that. The change that you have brought about at Specsavers, I'm quite sure has impacted hundreds, possibly thousands of people, with the sort of if you take into effect the sort of ripple effect outward, because those people will have families and wider networks, and they'll be sort of talking about it to their friends and their partners and their children and mothers. So thanks very much for coming on and sharing your experience at Specsavers with us.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Middling Along podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go and leave us a review over at Apple Podcasts. You can check out the full back catalogue of all our episodes over at middlingalong.com. You can also find out more about my work as a coach. Go to www.thetripleshift.org.